Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a look at social emotional development pre-K suspension and its implication on school transition. I'm Angel Cooper. I'm the Director of School Transition and Early Literacy at United Way of Greater Atlanta. And I have with me today Ms. Wande Okanoran Meadows, who is the Executive Director of Little Ones Learning Center, Ms. Elise Payne with Odyssey Family Counseling, and psychologist Dr. Willie Cameron. Unfortunately, our last presenter, Mr. Cole, could not join us today. He has a family emergency, so let's keep him keep him in our prayers. Next slide, please. So we're going to start off the session with a short poll, which is going to go into the chat. And because we're a small group, you can either come off mute and share your responses that way, or if you want to put them in the chat, you can. But the questions are, what age should suspension happen? Do you have a zero suspension policy at your workplace? And what is the youngest age you have suspended or have seen suspension occur? So if any of the participants would like to answer any of those questions, again, you can either come off mute or you can add it to the chat.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the poll.
Okay, so the poll is in the chat. The questions are, what age should suspension happen? Do you have a zero suspension policy at your workplace? What is the youngest age you have suspended or have seen suspension occur? And then the final question, which I left off, is, are you getting extra support at your sites because of COVID, or do you still need support? So if anybody wants to address any of those questions, either come off mute or you can put your answer in the chat. And we have a response in the chat from Yenny Garcia. We have a zero suspension policy in our centers, and we have added additional support at our centers, but we still need support. Thank you, Yenny, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Anyone else like to answer the poll before we get started?
I'd like to share. My name is Miss Unique Clay with Unique's Early Development Center. I am a family child care provider here in Cobb County, over 25 years of experience, 3-star quality rated, always trying to do what we can for our students and families. I've only had to dismiss one school-age child, and he was around maybe 5 or 6. And there was just so many behavior problems that I kind of just remember we were walking in the square of Cobb County and he said something, and I've always had a diversified set of students, and the words that came out of his mouth was just intolerable, and I had to give that family the pink slip. But that was probably over 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
I try to really make sure the values that I have are very similar to the family's values that are coming in, and I typically do not have those issues. Unfortunately, when you're in the public sector, you can't pick and choose. So, you know, there's so many different results. And I'm here because I do have a nephew who's struggling in the classroom of a pre-K. And I'm here to learn and see what I can do for him.
Well, thank you for sharing. Someone else in the chat said they've seen as young as 4 or 5 year-old suspended. And Ms. Hall from APS says that APS has a 0 suspension policy in pre-K, and they are getting additional support through their Office of Early Learning and School-Based Supports. So before we move on, is there anyone else that would like to share?
I gotta say this too. It is so important. I can't say enough. And the masses of students in the settings with pre-K and kindergarten and even up until 3rd grade, I see that the teachers are not bonding like they should with each student, which means that they really just, you can't just bond with the student and not the family and the home entity. You have to, we just don't have enough time to bond like we should, because when we cannot bond and establish a great relationship with that student that we need to work with, and they're bouncing from teacher to teacher to teacher throughout the years, it makes it very difficult for, you know, a child so young to be able to connect in the classroom in so many different ways. And there's a lot of children that don't get into, or I'll say pre-K is their first form of a classroom outside or learning environment outside of their home, which makes it very difficult. And so we must start educating our parents and making sure that their children are getting what they need as early as possible. So those transitions from out of the home, whether it be a small environment or a larger environment, that we do what's needed for our children for their success when they get into grade school. I'm gonna yield the floor. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. And then the last entry in the chat, I'm no longer an ECE teacher, but age does not correlate with suspension and vice versa. And this person has seen, Ms. Long Coleman has seen as young as 3 years old being suspended. So thank you for sharing. We'll come back to that topic again at the end of the conversation, but let's go on to the next slide. Before we get started with the conversation, well, first of all, let me go over the agenda. We've done the welcomes, we've done the icebreaker, and we're going to look at some of the social emotional development and school transition impacts. We're going to hear a voice from early learning, a word from the experts, and then we will talk about our work together and next steps. Next slide, please. So why is this important to us? There are many benefits to social and emotional learning, and it reduces, as you all have already mentioned, aggressive behavior, emotional problems. It increases self-confidence and improves classroom behavior. And we're going to get into more of this when we hear from our experts. But we're going to first delve a little into what the research says. So next slide, please. And can I get a volunteer from the audience to read the slide for us? Anybody?
I have no problems reading one slide. I have my students in the background. According to New America, the Educational Council, when early learning experiences are connected from birth through 3rd grade, children and their families can more easily transition into pre-K, kindergarten, and the early elementary grades. While transitions are important every school year, they have become even more critical due to the widespread disruptions caused by COVID-19. Schools face multiple scenarios, including increased demand for pre-K after many parents chose to keep their children out of formal pre-K programs, an influx of kindergartners with greater variation in skills. Lastly, first graders with limited or no kindergarten experience.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, I'll do this one. A child's early years set the trajectory for the relationships and successes they will experience for the rest of their lives, making it crucial that children's earliest experiences truly foster and never harm their development. As such, expulsion and suspension practices in early childhood settings, too stressful and negative experiences young children and their families may encounter in early childhood programs should be prevented, severely limited, and eventually eliminated. High quality early childhood programs provide the positive experiences that nurture positive learning and development. Next slide. All right, can I get a volunteer to read the last slide?
I can read it.
I will. Not only do these practices have the potential to hinder social, emotional, and behavioral development, they also remove children from early learning environments and the corresponding cognitively enriching experiences that contribute to healthy development and academic success later in life. Expulsion and suspension practices may also delay or interfere with the processes of identifying and addressing underlying issues, which may include disabilities or mental health issues.
Thank you. Next slide. Okay, and I think we skipped a slide or they're out of order. So we can hold it there, but before we hear from our experts, I wanted to turn things over to Wande. This whole session was a result of a conversation that I had with Wande about what she felt early childhood educators wanted to hear about and were being challenged by. So I'm going to turn things over to Wande to sort of set the stage about what
the way that I would like to use the funds is to support some.
Yes.
Outside of.
Let me do my volume. Okay. This is Elisa.
And then the other one that
I don't know who we're hearing. Is everybody on mute? Except Wande? Okay. Wande?
Yeah,
Can
I'm
you hear me?
here. I can hear
Okay.
you.
Okay, the floor is yours.
I would add.
Okay. Well, yeah, it just had Elisa's slide presentation up here still. So I wasn't sure.
So today is great.
I'm not sure who's talking and I'm not sure what's going on with slides, but go ahead and share your story.
Okay, thank you.
Try to like.
Yes, so I'm Wanda Okanoran Meadows with Little Ones Learning Center. We are out here in Clayton County, where we, at the height of the pandemic, we had, let me think, 160 160 children here at our school, and now we're about a third enrolled. And like you that have weathered this pandemic, you know, it's been difficult. We always talk about having having a zero expulsion policy. I know some of you all mentioned, we talked about that at the beginning of this presentation, but, you know, just thinking about all of this stuff we've been doing that virtually, we've been doing this stuff online, and how that affects, you know, where are kids going to be in 2 years? We say that they haven't been. I was talking to a teacher the other day, and she said that imagine, or I think Stacy was with me, and they were saying how difficult it is even just to teach how to cut scissors online. So just that basic frustration that comes with cutting scissors can lead to, you know, behavioral. I mean, it just becomes a compounding effort. So we have always said that there's no substitution for human interaction. So when the when the governor shut the entire state down, we made a conscious decision here at our school to make sure that we stayed in person. So we would rather serve fewer kids in person than serving, the masses online. It's very hard to teach reading skills. It's very hard to teach social and emotional and friendship skills. Like, how do you teach how to be a good friend online? How do you stay engaged online? Even when I'm here on this call right now, sometimes I might have, and some of the teachers here can attest to it, I will have 1,000 browsers open, and that leads to lots of different distractions. So if adults are having a hard time being focused, how do you think kids can be focused in the world of virtual learning? And then we're getting upset that, they're not focused, you're not focused, you're not focused. But if you pay attention to the way the media treats kids and the images that they put on TV, those images are just going like, boom, boom, boom. Their brains are going like this. Like, it is like, it's all over the place. So it's just really important that we here at Little Ones continue to just work with our children. We had no Babies Can't Wait, those agencies that are very valuable to the community. They wanted us to put the kids in front of more screen to try to teach kids social, emotional, and all these other skills that really could not be done through the computer.
Thank you. Next slide, please. If you're joining us late, Mr. Cole had a family emergency, so he won't be speaking. So we're going to move on to Ms. Payne from Odyssey Family Counseling Center, followed by Dr. Willie Cameron. Ms. Payne, the floor is yours. And please proceed to the next slide.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elise Payne, and I am the Child and Adolescent Services Coordinator at Odyssey Family Counseling Center. I've had the pleasure of working at Odyssey for close to 6 years, and I started in school-based mental health and moved up eventually to the position I am now. But all of my time has been spent mostly with those under the age of 10, working in the school setting for behavioral and mental health challenges that were going on. I've got a few slides to describe kind of the milestones that kids experience, and then some of my viewpoint and what we're seeing in our center with families and children. I know most of you as early childhood educators are going to know some of these things, so I'm going to run through them quickly, but just to highlight what changes we've experienced in the last couple of years as we've watched children react to the climate that they're in. So, between 3 to 5 years, students and children should be gaining independence. Play is so vitally important. That's how they're learning. So play isn't just a fun pastime or activity, that's active learning that they're doing. And I'm actually a play therapist. So I utilize their ability to learn and process and develop understanding of the world in therapy to help them process through some of the things that might be very challenging for them, or some of the experiences that they've witnessed or gone through in their young lives already. They're building relationships with non-family members and understanding the differences in those relationships, and their language is booming. I did a lot of research in language development in grad school, and this is where we're seeing them just become these little chatterboxes. At the age of 2, there should be a language explosion. And then between 3 to 5 years, that just exponentially grows and grows and grows. So you're getting all the questions, the why, who, what, where that we love our toddlers and young children and their energy for the world. We're also seeing their socialization build and develop. They're understanding rules in a different way. It's not just the boundaries of because someone says so, but because of how it impacts their environment. They are seeking relationships out now. This is not just whoever they're around and that's who they experience their life with, but they're actually building relationships and seeking people out who they are really enjoying being around. They like to make decisions, they're understanding context more, and they're telling stories and having conversations beyond just what they need or want. They're actually starting to interact in a way more socially. So that's in 3 to 5. And then as they move into early elementary school, between 6 to 8 years, they have rapid development of socialization. Their focus is on their friends and being accepted and identity around that. That will continue as they become adolescents later on. But this development of socialization and building the relationships and understanding trust and intimacy in a way of within friendships, they're thinking about the future and who they are, and they like to be in teams and do teamwork and taking on new challenges. They're also better able to describe their life. My 3 to 5-year-olds are going to give me responses like the 4-year-old I worked with last week, who, when asked, what does he want to be when he grows up? He looked at me for a minute and he goes, I want to be 5. So that's about what he can describe for his life. And that would be a totally normal response for him. He also told me that if he could make life any way he wanted, he would be a giraffe, and that his Gigi would need a bigger house to hold him. That's a normal response from a 4-year-old. I would expect that response. And it makes me smile and makes me happy to work with 4-year-olds, because I don't hear that from my 6 to 8-year-olds. 6 to 8-year-olds are going to start introducing that logic of, when I grow up, I want to be this. And it's more of a career path or an identity that they've heard about or learned about. They're also able to describe their life better. And they are able to answer when I say, what would you like to be different? They're able to say, I would like life to look like this, or I want to be this, or I wish that everybody would stop bullying me, or I wish that I had one student say, I wish my parents would talk to each other with kinder voices. And so, you hear things like that, especially, remember, I'm a mental health therapist. I'm working and asking questions to understand how they're viewing life. So these are kind of the normal developmental milestones that we're typically experiencing with kids. At the beginning of the presentation, we had a circular image and said social emotional learning, and some of the things that are included are self-management, social awareness, relationships, decision-making, and self-awareness. So those are all things that we'd be looking at specifically as mental health practitioners, but also as educators. You're looking at how these students are able to do that, because that's how they're learning. I don't think you can separate these things. They all are interconnected. Next slide, please. So when Angel asked me to participate in this and wanted to know my thoughts on it, it took me a second to kind of process for myself what this means. And what I kept coming back to is a quote from one of my mentors, Dr. Brack. And she said, children are great thermometers. They are not the thermostats in the room or the building. They're the thermometers responding to the climate that they're in. Children don't behave out of nowhere or don't come out of a vacuum. There's always context to what's going on. And so the fact that we're seeing in my center and in the schools that we're working in, we're seeing much higher rates of self-harm, suicidal ideation, suicidal behaviors, seeing a lot more depression and anxiety in the last 2 years. I mean, absolutely has boomed, and even younger. We're seeing just this week, we've had several suicide attempts from those in 5th and 6th grade, which is a little young than we normally would see that. And it's a challenge. This is not, we were expecting to see things like this, and we are seeing them. And it's not because they just have suddenly become more, people like to blame media or social media, and not that they're suddenly more engaged that way, although they are with things like TikTok and Instagram that have become really vital for socialization for kids during the pandemic. It's also because the whole world is more stressful. Everybody is stressed. Everybody is dealing with crises in one way or another, whether that's financially, whether that's educationally, whether that's, in relationship. There's been so many of our families who have gone through separations and divorces over the last few years because there was already stress. And then this put them in a crucible setting where now it's gotten worse. And it just causes more stress and more fatigue and more intensity. And we're not out of it yet. I mean, we're still in this. We have come out of the most recent surge with Omicron, but who knows what the future holds. And so much of our sense of stability can be in future planning. And we really can't plan for the future very well when we're not sure what plans might be sidetracked or derailed based on the pandemic. And we're all living in that. And our kids are very receptive and responsive to that environment. So I want us to think about that the children are thermometers, not the thermostat. They're not setting the temperature, and they're not the ones who just decide that this is how they're going to behave, but that they're responding to the climate and the context that we're in. Next slide, please. So we're asked to say kind of what can we do? And Dr. Cameron, you can come in as well too. I don't want to take over all of it because I'm sure I can't wait to hear from your experience as well. Some of the things that we talk about in our setting, what can we do for the child or the children? When we know that humans have a sense of lack of power or control, the thing that we need to help them do is find power and control in appropriate ways. One of the goals of misbehavior that we talk about in my play therapy work is power and control. And so what you do is give them power and control in appropriate ways, like choose what you want to wear today, or choose from a list of activities what we're going to do next, so that the sense of power and control of they can't control that they may have to wear a mask, or they may have to sit farther apart from their friends than they would like, or they have to be in a smaller room or smaller setting than they're used to, or they can't go outside or share items the way that they would previously. We help give them other choices and other sense of power. That might be helping out more, assigning more tasks. As far as I've seen, early childhood education centers have done a great job of that, with helping kids label and identify areas that they can have control. Another thing is being really honest about the emotions and practice using them and naming them. And what has made a big difference is adults naming their emotions honestly with kids, not to open up and expect the kids to be your therapist or help you process through anything that's really challenging going on, but being able to say today, and I'll say this with my students I work with, today Miss Elisa's feeling kind of tired. There's a lot of stuff going on yesterday, and today my mood is just a little bit low. And so I'm feeling tired and maybe a little cranky, but you're important to me and I'm still going to be here. But I want you to know that sometimes even adults feel that way too. And you're just modeling and acknowledging it, because again, kids are thermometers. They're going to respond to what's going on around them. We have to make sure we encourage and practice coping skills with the kids. And we need more than ever to be able to cope and practice different ways and acknowledge that we need that. We also need to offer alternative coping skills and behaviors, because when they're acting out or tantruming, fill in the blank, that is a way of them coping with what's happening internally for them or externally. That's just a response. And so giving them another option. I remember a teacher telling me, and this is me learning from educators, them saying, I don't say what I don't want them to do. I say what I want them to do. So instead of Johnny, get your feet off the table, she would say, Johnny, feet on the floor, and remind them speak in a positive way and remind them of the skills that they have. For families, we have to help normalize all of this. None of us know what to do. There's no book about surviving a pandemic together in this setting and in this environment. So helping normalize it, educate them on the skills you're using in the classroom, and then have some family support programming as much as possible. So we've been doing a lot of work out in the community where we host events for families to process what's going on, discuss other parenting and positive parenting techniques. And then having family fun days, family game nights, family book events that can be virtual or in person, depending on the need, and refer families to providers if it's beyond the scope of what you guys have going on. There are providers in the area, and United Way has great database of different providers for different areas of need. I know that we serve the South Fulton community. We have a contract with Fulton County Schools, and we work with some early childhood education centers as well. So those are some of the different things. For teachers, we need to build communities, provide self-care opportunities for our educators, listen to them and validate their concerns. My roommate is a second grade teacher in Cobb County, and I hear all the time about what's going on with her and her students. And it's really important that we validate it, even when we're exhausted and and we're in the same boat, validating one another's feelings and their concerns are there. Also focusing on growth and not previous milestones that sometimes no longer apply in this situation. Maybe kids are not going to experience the same level of socialization as they would previously from home because they haven't been in the early childhood settings until now, until they're a little bit older. So recognizing that we need to focus on the growth. Where did they come in at and where are they now to see their progress? For school, these are all things that a school can help build, but it might be time to review your protocols and expectations for students, families, and staff and how you're going to meet those needs. Everybody's having to do overhauls of those things. I can speak from our community-based setting. We've had to do that in light of COVID-19. And making sure to be creative about things and ask for support. That's one thing of the pandemic we've noticed is that people really are trying to support where they can. And so getting creative about that is important. And in the community, helping make all this possible. If you're in the community and maybe you're not an educator, do your part in offering support to teachers, students, and their families. Engage in health practices also to reduce the spread of the virus and surges that are going on. You know, we all have a part to play in this to take care of one another. And also talk about these experiences with the people that you know in the community. It's important that the whole community is supported and engaged and modeling that social emotional learning together. So those are some of the different things that we can do as a community on all levels to support our students. I have one last slide and just wanted to hit on that. Remember that we must connect the context to the content. We have to know that that's really important. We have never experienced this current challenge in educating and caring for children, and we must advocate for their needs and respect their reactions to the current climate because we've never been here before. In the same way, we have to have grace for ourselves. So we are not the same and neither are our children, and that's okay. We just have to be able to work together and acknowledge what's changed for all of us.
Thank you, Ms. Payne. That was very enlightening. And I'm going to ask that the audience hold any questions until after we hear from Dr. Cameron. So Dr. Cameron, you are up.
Yeah.
We can stay on this slide for now.
Yeah, yes, at least you did a great job. You covered a lot of points I was going to, which is great since we both do the same thing. A little about myself. My background is actually research psychology, along with school psychology, criminology, and counseling. So I'm gonna, touch on about 2-3 things that and kind of expand that at least also talk about as far as building that working relationship between school and community. Without that, the child is going to fall within the cracks. You know, so again, the community aspect, not a lot, again, the school can do in the community. So we got to get the community involved, which is the parents, the cousins, whoever involved into the help. It's a village approach. It takes a village to raise the child. And I want to talk about some alternatives to suspension. This is more of a criminal justice, but it's also juvenile justice called restorative practices. Instead of punishing, let's have especially the fight. Let's sit down, let's process this. Taking the time to, a child is young, a 3 or 4-year-old is young, they can't get it, but you start the process. Let's talk about these things versus just acting out. Restorative justice, well, what actually happened? And then with the child, what is going to take for you to feel whole? And even it's important to pay attention to the victim and also the perpetrator. I hate to use those terms, but the perpetrator also has to get what he or she needs so they'll stop victimizing other kids. School-wide behavior interventions, trauma-sensitive schools. Unfortunately, right now, school shootings not happening that much anymore, but still traumas in these schools. I remember about 10 years ago, I went to, I think it was North Atlanta, South Atlanta, one of those high schools, and they had metal detectors. I worked in a prison for 20 years. So when I went to a school with metal detectors, I'm like, I feel safe in the prison than I do in school, which is not good. So we talked about social emotional learning, but this also has to happen in the community. Kids need to learn this from mom, dad, community organizers. You need to learn this, tap into your community resources. And also, I'm getting to the therapy aspect. I've done a lot of family therapy, and that's what I do, at least. Instead of play therapy, I do family therapy. What I get, unfortunately, is, look, I'm okay. Help my child. I'm like, the child is a function of the system. You know, so if you don't participate in therapy, what does it look like for your child? Because it's not the child itself, it's your child is operating from a system that doesn't function. So you might notice I take a system perspective. It's not the individual, it's the system we need to help. Behavior modification. I know that a lot of teachers you're training curriculum, but not behavior modification. That's where we come in. Don't believe in punishment because it doesn't work. Reinforcement, we know works better than punishment. Yeah, conditioning. Yeah, that's what one person. Conditioning. We realize that punishment simply does not work. So the more we use it, the less likely we're going to get a change in behaviors. And I call them super kids. You got these super kids, the more you punish, the worse they get. And again, that's not healthy. And I want to finish up with, again, community involvement, mentoring programs. A lot of times these young kids have nobody to look up to. Get them involved with a mentor.
Hey guys, what are we doing?
Get them involved in a mentoring program and build safe schools. Because if a child is not safe, they can't learn for the most part. Those are the points I wanted to make, but Elise did a great job. So I didn't have to do a lot.
No, that's excellent, Dr. Cameron. I really appreciate one of the focuses that you said of helping to teach kids how to respond and behave. And it's not just about punishment, but teaching what we want. If those of you on the call are familiar with PBIS, a lot of schools are having to use that. Elementary and middle and high schools, especially in Fulton County, are using that. They say, if a child doesn't know how to read, we teach them how to read. If a child doesn't know how to tie their shoes, we teach them how to tie their shoes. If a child doesn't know how to add, we teach them how to add. But if a child doesn't know how to behave, and the answer is typically punish. And instead, we need to teach them how to behave. We have to teach them in the same way that we teach them all the other skills that are so brilliantly executed along the way. We have to also teach behavior. And that is often missed because of where we've come from as adults, maybe the culture or the environment we were brought up in, but also there's a lot of pressure to push and be negative, and instead taking it the other way, like you said, is so important. So I'm glad you said that. Thank you, Dr. Cameron.
So I'm done.
Angel, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cameron. Thank you, Ms. Payne. And I'm sure the audience has questions for our experts. So I want to open up the floor and leave plenty of time. You can either put your questions in the chat, or again, since we're a small group, if you want to come off mute to ask anything. And Wanda, please join in as well, because I know you're representing several different child care centers that may have questions as well. Any questions or concerns that you want a deeper dive or maybe weren't covered, although our experts did a good job of covering quite a bit?
Thank you, everyone. This was very informative. I know you guys mentioned a little bit about what are the things that we can do with families to kind of help them through this process as well. So can you speak more about what are specific strategies that early learning centers could implement to support parents?
This is Dr. Cameron. I'll take a little shot at that. A lot of that is if the parent is open to being referred, and I know Clayton County and Fulton, I do get a lot of referrals from them. If the parent is open to being referred to a psychotherapist, first we got to do a lot of disclaimer about, what therapy is about. A lot of it is teaching. But I say you can have a list of therapists in your community that know how to deal with these problematic kids and families and refer them to us individuals. But family therapy, I think, is not used as much as it should be, because like I said, the child is a part of the system. So you can have a referral therapist in your area to refer the family to.
One thing that we've also been implementing is helping educate the families on what's happening in the school and what the social emotional learning curriculum is. A lot of schools have some form of social emotional learning curriculum or programming that they're using. And a lot of times the families are unaware or don't have the time to digest that through all the other information going on in the school system in the day and just, notes home or something. So having an opportunity where the parents are brought into that, we've had several family events where we invite parents in, teach them about the curriculum that's going on. We work collaboratively with the teachers, and then our programming as on-site mental health providers in a lot of schools. We go over the ways that we do provide group support, because sometimes interactions between children has been really challenging. And we teach them what restorative practices are being used in the school, like Dr. Cameron referred to, and the ways that we're responding to outbursts or tantrums or the mindset that we're coming from, so they too can understand it and ask questions about it. Also having opportunities that are positive moments for families to interact with the school. A lot of times I've seen students who are, labeled maybe challenging or the problem student, and then their parent is always being called with the difficulties that are going on. And so their connection to the system in the school is really negative, because it's always about somehow that the child is having difficulties. And so having family fun nights or programmings or book events or some sort of social emotional learning games or something like that brings in the family in a positive environment, so that they too are orienting the way that the school is trying to engage with the families. And also ask other providers in the area. Dr. Cameron is in the area and I'm in the area, and other providers are all around you. We have quite a lot of resources in the Metro Atlanta area, thankfully, to come out and speak and talk about those things and share, because we don't do the work because it's glorious or glamorous. We do the work because we care about communities and people and individuals and systems. So getting engaged with a provider to do that as well. Those are some of the things that we do. I would recommend for families.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat. I'm hoping someone can answer it, or else I will research it. Are there any stats on Georgia ECE suspensions and how we are addressing them? Does anybody know what the statistics are on early childhood suspensions? That's something I can possibly find out and send out.
Yeah, as far as addressing it, I can say the Department of Early Care and Learning, they've done a lot to invest in early child care. There are many programs such as PBIS, which is K through 12 systems have. So that's now has now started to come down to the early care center. So we know that if we work with teachers and let them know that, hey, little so-and-so Andre isn't acting out because he's determined to come to school and just cut up. We have to look at it from a different perspective. Maybe he did not get fed last night. Maybe he witnessed something that was, bad. But getting that into the mindset of early educators across the state and across the country, that is where your challenge is going to be. Because if you've grown up in a system, think about how you were 20 years ago or 30 years ago when you were a child, maybe in early care. That was not the thinking. It was, get a paddle, go sit down, this. Children are to be seen and not heard. So we have that's been ingrained in generations, right? That takes a whole different type of system to, no matter how much education and how much funding is invested, it's just a whole cultural shift and integration that has to happen, I think. So, yeah.
Thank you, Wande. Ms. Unique Clay says, when we implement a child's needs at their earliest age of infancy, we then will lessen or eliminate many of the social emotional issues before a child reaches preschool. We need more advocacy, and I can't read the rest of it. Okay, we need more advocacy with education from the womb is what early childhood education from the womb is what I strongly believe my students are successfully striving with parental and classroom involvement. And Ms. Unique, did you want to come off the mic or come off mute and say anything more about that?
actually working. Like I said, I've been in family
Yes,
childcare
I'm
for,
sorry, I keep forgetting that.
it's okay. My students are
We
not,
appreciate you being here.
yes, they're not swinging from the ceilings. They are learning through play, and they are always actively learning. But moreover, I love what we all do as leaders and educators. I am a strong advocate. I have 4 children of my own. I have one about to leave out the nest, and the other ones, bachelor's, master's, 1 doctorate. And I'm telling you, when we can teach our students or our parents at an early age, they see the urge of the language, what's needed, in nurturing our children or their children from a very early age, so that when they get to preschool or in the grade school, they don't have these issues. And that's what's needed. We need this across our nation. Is we need to focus on the children that's coming out of the womb. And when we can do that, we will lessen the issues for these teachers in pre-K or kindergarten and 1st grade. And I'm telling you, I see that. I see it on both ends. And I know, we all know, I think we all know why we struggle. And we struggle because we need to get this information across to those that are having children. I'm gonna yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Unique. We're going to have some resources added to the chat. Please, if you have other questions or concerns, now is the time to voice them. So Pam has added some resources into the chat, so please take a look at them at your convenience. And again, I'm just asking before, because we can end early if we don't have any more questions, but this is your opportunity to ask Dr. Cameron and Ms. Payne anything you want to ask them concerning what's going on in your universe. So are there any more questions for the good of the cause?
I do have a question. And
Yes.
one of my questions for Dr. Cameron is, I want to know his thoughts about, oh my goodness, brain freeze, cameras in the classroom. I would love to know what he thinks about that. Quickly, I want to say I'm an advocate for cameras in the classrooms. And this is not to, look into what we need to see what's going on in the classrooms. The parents, say they don't understand why little Johnny's acting the way he's acting. And then, I think too, we can weed out some of the bad apples in the classroom as well as educators. We need to see what's going on. I had a son, and he wouldn't mind having the camera on him in the classroom. He has no problems with it. It makes me feel good as a parent because he knows he's doing what he should be doing. So tell me your thoughts, and I'm going to yield the floor. Thank you.
Yeah, I got no problem with cameras in the classroom because, again, now, everybody gets a chance to see what's actually going on, and you don't have to hear the word of anybody else. You got the camera right there to show you what actually happened, and it protects everybody, I think.
I have a question for Dr. Campbell. Dr. Campbell, with the cameras in the classroom, and if you have I'm an early educated teacher, early childhood teacher, and I had a parent to watch my camera and saw that their child was just acting up in my classroom. And then the question they have for me, well, why don't you just go get her and make her sit down? And I'm thinking to myself, that's not what I'm supposed to do. So what are your opinions on that when you have parents that want you to touch their child? Because as you know, we're not supposed to be putting our hands on these children, and they want you to make them do something. What are your thoughts?
Well, again, you direct little Johnny, I need for you to sit down. little Johnny say, hell no, I'm not going to sit down. So now
Correct.
you
So
get
then
that
what's your next step?
A, you can't make them sit down. You do what you got to do. It's for protocol and it's for what does the school tell you to do. But now you got evidence that little John is not just being disobedient, but he's letting you know he can do what he wants to do. Again, it's not your job to put hands on any child.
Absolutely.
So again, it shows what you're dealing with, though.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And I think that would be a great opportunity to invite the parent in to be inclusive with their own child's learning.
I agree with that to a certain extent, Ms. Clay, but I also, if the parents are in the classroom and the child is still misbehaving, you can't allow that parent to put their hands on that child, even though that's their child, in your presence.
Let me speak to putting hands on. And again, yes, it's not okay, but at the same time, the parent needs to learn behavior modification besides corporal punishment. I'm not gonna lie, I grew up in Mississippi. I got beaten for what I was gonna do tomorrow. But when I learned different, I did different. So now, not for the teachers, but it's for people to come in and talk about parenting. As far as punishment, corporal punishment, it's been proven not to work. So we got to use other skills besides that to get the child to be compliant.
Absolutely. My youngest child is 17. I have a 38 as of today, a 30-year-old, and a 27-year-old. I'm not going to tell you that those three didn't get corporal punishment, but my 17-year-old, I've never spanked him a day in my life. However, if anybody wants to spank a child, I have one. But anyway, nevertheless, I really think if you can nurture a child, you know, and give them what they need early on, you don't have to do that, you know. So if we can go ahead and start the advocacy for the earliest ones, but now we have the ones that are 5, 6, 7 and on up, it's going to take a little bit of work to get them where they need to go. And I'm not saying, I'm seeing the cameras in the classrooms. I am not advocating for anyone to put a hand on a student in the classroom. I'm just saying that once the cameras are there, it's a lot of transparency for everyone, and we can see what we need to do, you know, with that particular child. And there's so many things that we can do before putting our hands on a child.
Thank you. Dr. Victoria is asking, at what point do we determine that a child would benefit from additional support and act on that formally?
I don't want to sound like I'm hogging the show, but
No, go for it. Go for it.
I think that sometimes we get caught up on age versus, you know, the behavior. You want to catch any type of behavior as early as possible, so that way you got a better chance of dealing with it. I don't so much look at age. I look at basically the behavior that a child is choose to exhibit. I can remember when I was growing up, the age that most kids would try alcohol or weed was 13. Right now, I'm hearing as young as 6. So, I mean, I look at the behavior, not so much the age, and just act appropriately. But again, like we said, it's the village approach. We got to get everybody involved and for the betterment of these kids. And I think at least even us as well as therapists got to do a better job as far as educating people what therapy is really about. And a lot of people think therapists are crazy people. Well, no, it's not. And if you want to look at it like that, we all are a little special. But so I go with, you know, the behavior. If it's something that you can't deal with, if it's out of control, that's when you want to get some assistance for the child as early as possible.
I agree, Dr. Cameron. I was going to say, when we are partnering with schools, we get that question a lot. You know, when is it the right time to make the referral? And usually it's where it's gone beyond the supports that the school is being able to provide. We all know that kids we all know what is kind of normal in the range of each individual child. I'm not talking about across all children, but when you've built a relationship with a child in the classroom setting and you see that things are just, they're continuing to struggle in these areas, or they're continuing to need a lot of support, they're not getting down the skills, or you're trying to teach them about how to name their emotions or how to respond instead they keep tantruming and tantruming and tantruming, and you've worked with the parent, then it's time to make a referral. Also, we see a lot of families struggling with events that have happened. So maybe there's been a death in the family, there's been a car accident, there's been a major loss, there's been a parent who's been incarcerated, there's a grandparent is facing, difficulties with dementia or Alzheimer's, and so the child has lost kind of a relationship with that person, and it's not the same as it used to be. When things like that are going on, we also say, please refer so that the family can have additional support to manage it, because we would expect that a child would have more difficulty when something like that happens. And we really underestimate, I think, in our society, when events like that happen and how intensely it impacts the kids. I hear all the time, like, when I'm asking a family, what brings you guys into therapy they've said that the child is the concern, right? Well, what brings you guys into therapy? Well, all of a sudden, 2 years ago, they just stopped listening. They didn't want to behave. They would have nightmares. They wouldn't sleep at night anymore. They, telling me all these things 2 years ago. And so I'll go, well, why do you think this is happening? I don't know. They just don't care about me, or they don't care about our family, or they just think they can do whatever they want to do, right? And then I'll say, okay, well, what happened 2 years ago? Well, my husband got laid off, and now he has to have another job where he's away from the family 5 days a week. And it changed the whole dynamic in the household. And my child, they were closest to him as the parent. That's who had the stronger bond. And I go, magically 2 years ago that happened, and then magically the behavior started. And it seems it's easy when you're in the moment in dealing with that to forget the context of what happened 2 years ago, because you're trying to respond to the needs. That's a crisis situation. When stuff like that is going on, that's a great time to refer to therapy, when there's a big shift, not because we want to label that as wrong or that the child can't deal with it, but because they need some additional support. And like Dr. Cameron said, we want to intervene as early as possible to provide support. And hopefully that child won't develop symptoms related to stress in the home, right? Because stress is going to happen. They're going to develop something to deal with it. But hopefully we could teach them positive coping, and in a way that doesn't lead to the other ones. And so as therapists, we often have to be really good detectives of going like, so it happened 2 years ago. Tell me what happened 2 years ago. And I don't know about you, Dr. Cameron, but inevitably something happened 2 years ago. We can point it back to it, and then we can help them make sense of it. And it stopped being about the kid being bad, quotes, but about the kid responding to the environment they were in. And then it became a repeated pattern. And now they've learned that they don't have to do what they are being told if they throw a tantrum every single time. What started as a coping skill now has become a pattern of behavior that has lasted and is getting them what they want in a way. And so educating the families on that. And that's very complex, because we can all look back in our lives where things like that have happened. Not one of us gets out of this without some sort of challenging event, whether you would identify that as a crisis or traumatic or what have you. Every person I know has had some sort of challenging moment in their life that has changed how they view the world or connected to themselves. So kids are doing that too, and it's in their development that's happening, and we got to make sure we respond to that. So anytime there's a big challenging thing going on, and also if they've gone beyond the scope of what can normally be addressed in the school setting, we say make a referral to a provider.
Thank you. Well, we have a big thing going on right now, which is the pandemic, which is how this conversation got started. So before we go to our final poll, Wande, I wanted to bring you back in. Is there anything you want to ask or want to share that's not been addressed? Since I know this was your concern and you're sort of representing a collective of early childhood educators.
No, I just appreciated the discussion in the chat. Lots of good thoughts, and vibrant, and Dr. Cameron and Unique and everybody else that contributed. I appreciate it. But yeah, I guess just my takeaway would be, just to continue. Number one, please don't put on an equity lens, because there is no such thing of taking something on and off. It should be embedded in everything that we do constantly throughout. And y'all, I know I'm being recorded, but things are messed up right now. We're in trouble. We're in trouble. So, we've seen the video of, what happens at the start line. And I can't stress the need for making sure that it starts now at 2 and 3 and 4 years old. We see it all the time, what it looks like. So pre-pandemic, we would see 16 and 17-year-olds that step on one another's shoes and they take out a gun and shoot each other, right? So imagine that now, these kids that have not had the benefit of early care, being in schools with awesome educators that are working on these friendship skills and how to regulate your emotions and feelings. 2 years have gone without any of this stuff. So it is troubling, because nobody wants to send their kid to kindergarten or first grade or second grade or whatever it is. And teachers are just not equipped to deal with what's coming at them. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody who participated and joined us today. We're going to close with a final poll. So Ryan, would you please put the poll into the chat? And the questions are, and again, you can either answer in the chat or you can come off mic. Again, should suspension happen in pre-K? Does pre-K suspension have an impact on school readiness and academic success? Has COVID-19 provided impact on social emotional behaviors in pre-K children? So any differences of opinion than you had at the beginning of our session together? Again, please put it in the chat or come off mic if you have anything either you want to say about the poll or just something you want to share as we close out.
I'm sorry, can you share the poll again?
Sure. Ryan, are you putting it in the chat? There it is. Should suspension happen in pre-K? Does pre-K suspension have impact on school readiness, academic success? And has COVID-19 provided impact on social emotional behaviors in pre-K children? So if anybody wants to answer the poll or just give final remarks, anything you would like to share. Will you, if somebody has wrote, will you implement new strategies to school transition and social emotional behaviors? And the rest is cut off. So anybody want to share?
I will say this, I will continue with the process of transitioning my 4-year-olds, if I have any, into the pre-K sector. If allowed, I would love to do that. And in my line of work, what can I say? I try to do things and give my parents the resources that they need and collaborate them as early as possible to make sure we have the results that we need for our students. Every child is different, every child's needs are different, but we want to make sure, they stay on track with their milestones and be a successful person as they get on with their little lives. So,
Great.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We have a question from Dr. Victoria. What about the relationship between teachers and children where the teacher may be the problem? Either of our experts want to take that on, and that's going to be our last question before we close out.
I'll say a lot of times, who asked that, Doctor? Who said that?
Dr. Victoria.
Victoria, you hit the nail on the head. I think we've all seen that on that video that was on social media of the man that was he knew the secret handshake of all like 20 of his students, right? So how we start the day is how we end the day. And a lot of times that's exactly what it is. Miss Stacy, who's on this call right now, she's one of the PBIS coaches and works with the teachers to really put that kind of language and positivity into the teachers. And so one of the things that we do here at Little Ones is we say, whatever happened on Monday, that was on Monday. We're not going to come into the center on Tuesday and say, remember what happened yesterday? We're not going to have a bad day like we did yesterday. First of all, we're not going to use the word bad. That's number one. But we're not going to say, hey, you remember how you cut up yesterday? You just, why did we even bring that up to begin with? Like we were on a positive note. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Dr. Victoria. A lot of it is the teachers, because you cannot, if we're 40 plus years old, you cannot expect a child who is 4 years old to have a frontal lobe because it's not developed. The frontal lobe is not there. So expecting a 4-year-old to have the wherewithal to quote unquote know how to behave, it's on me as the adult to have my issues in order. And I'm saying that as a mother of 3 kids who drive me absolutely crazy every day after I get off work. So this is how it should be in theory, but yeah, that human stuff takes over. Our struggle. Yep, that's it.
Yep. I responded in the chat as well. And one day I echo what you've said of also teachers need support as well. We're all human. And saying, hey, let's have you thought about this? What's going on with you? And not in a way of like, what's wrong with you? But, I could see that this has been challenging. Do you maybe need to talk to somebody? We have providers in the area. There's no harm in it. We want to make sure that you're supported because, if the kids are feeling the stress, we're all swimming in the same pond together, y'all. Like we're all going to be stressed and have intensity. And that's one area of if we can normalize social emotional learning across the lifespan and across this is a community who engages and teaches each other and talks about our emotions and recognizes that sometimes it's very tough and that we need support, then it's easier to say, hey, I can tell that it's been really difficult the last month or the last few weeks and you've been really struggling, or if you know that they've been through a challenge like I talked about with the kids, have you thought about maybe talking to somebody? We have some supports in the area of providers we work with. This is really, really hard out here. And one of the few ways in our culture that people can get support is through therapy. In other cultures, they do it in other ways too. But also being in a faith community is really, really impactful and important for people, making sure that they have a community of teachers to go back and talk to and engage and feel support from, because they also might have difficulties going on. So having good education for them, but also when something's up, being able to say, something's up. Do you need some support? How can I support you? Would you like to go talk to somebody? Could we help make that happen? We have to do in the counseling field all the time. I'm a supervisor. And I'll have to say to my staff, hey, we have an employee assistance program for a reason. I think it's time for you to check that out. It's available to you. I want to make sure that you're supported fully, not because I think there's something wrong, but because I know that you want more for yourself and that you've set a standard for yourself. And right now things are going on and you're unable to meet that right now. So let's make sure that we set you up, because as a good supervisor, it would be really poor of me to just be mad at them and and just give them trainings because I'm frustrated with them, but make sure to address the needs that are going on, because it's all in the same thing. The frustration, all of that is going to be cooked together. So refer them to some support as well.
Thank you. And I'm going to cut it off there because we're getting ready to be cut off. So thank you to our experts, Dr. Cameron, Ms. Payne. Thank you, Wande, for your words of wisdom, and thank you all who participated in this session today. We hope this was helpful to you, and please reach out and we'll be sharing some other resources that we hope will help you in the future. But thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day, and absolutely be safe.